NRATV with Grant Stinchfield.
We discovered the leaders of the Some Women's March on the NRA hired armed security during their protest of the NRA, and we still don't know who paid for the guns. We are happy they acknowledge the importance of firearms for personal protection, but it is sad that the leaders of the Women's March are okay with armed security for themselves, but not everyday people of America. You know who needed armed security? A 10-year-old boy killed in Chicago, shot in the back while riding in his stepfather's SUV. That boy deserved armed security. Instead, the next best thing to your own personal security team is, of course, more law enforcement on the street. On a weekend in Chicago where 55 people were shot and 11 people killed, Tamika Mallory, the leader of the Women's March, not only hides behind her own armed protection, but she lambasts President Trump for sending in the feds to try to curb the violence in Chicago. Because the Department of Justice specializes in housing, food, and education, that's what they would say? No, Tamika Mallory. Of course they send police officers and federal agents to stop crime. That's who stop crime in neighborhoods. And in Chicago, for far too long, the criminals have been coddled on the streets there until the point they've gotten that they completely rule the streets, and police there have lost all control. Finally, they are doing something to try to get that control back. Look, gangbangers don't want jobs. And Tamika Mallory doesn't speak for the law-abiding in Chicago, who overwhelmingly welcome more law enforcement as the violence in that city continues to spiral out of control. Well, NRATV went to the Women's March to make sure the anti-gun hypocrisy of the march on the NRA was exposed. Jeff Hulbert and Paul Brockman, co-captains for the Patriot Picket, were there too. Gentlemen, it is great to have you on the show.
Hey, Grant, thanks for having us. We're big fans of the show.
Yeah, it's our pleasure, Grant.
We appreciate it, and I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of yours. You folks represented NRA membership so well, and I think the mainstream media was beside themselves at just how well you represented NRA members out there.
We enjoyed it. We should say at the outset, we're the Maryland-based Patriot Picket, so we're a crew. We've done this before. We were at the NRA a year ago when Code Pink tried to stage a die-in. We go when the loonies want to infringe and go after First Amendment and Second Amendment. That's what we do. But the Patriot Picket started it by going after politicians. I mean, we never envisioned ourselves as getting much farther away than the State House in Annapolis, Maryland. But after the 3-month legislative session was over, we were looking for more things to do. And suddenly we learned that the Code Pink was going to basically attack the NRA, and that's where we got started.
Well, you know, it is clear that you are in an area of the country that needs more and more people like you speaking up. Paul, let me ask you, when you were out there, one of the things I noticed you all were doing were going around to protesters and really just trying to educate them. It wasn't a combative atmosphere. You were trying to educate. What was the goal there?
Well, the goal is primarily to inform. A lot of these people don't know a whole lot about guns or citizen carry, and they're fearful. In fact, when Jeff was open carrying his AR at the Women's March, we actually had one lady scream out, "Oh my God, it's a machine gun!" It's a machine gun. And they were so basically it's educational. We try to engage the one that are willing to actually sit down and have some dialogue with us. Some of them just can't be reached, but others we try to really educate them on what we're doing, why we're here. Guns are not scary or evil.
Now, when she yells,
there's a lot of hysteria on the block. Yeah.
Oh, I can imagine, Jeff. And so when she yells, "It's a machine gun," do you actually tell her, "No, it's not, ma'am"? And you go up to her, or does she run away screaming with her hands in the air?
You get both. I had one lady. One lady actually reached out and tried to slap the gun, saying, "I need to touch it." And I go, "Ma'am, you don't need to touch it. It's just It's actually we understand when we do open carry that it causes a scene, but we do it for a reason, because even the Fairfax County Police, they preferred that I not do it. But we say the Patriot Picket is on our shirts. It says the Patriot Picket, so we picket, meaning we walk with it. We walk with their information. We walk with education. We're not always there. We can't convert, the real hardcore loonies in the crowd. But there is the mushy middle that's available to talk about Second Amendment rights. We also carry signs that encourage LGBTQ community members to get trained up on firearms and so on. But the real effectiveness of the Patriot Picket is our signage. You probably have a chance to see pictures of us with our signs. It's so old school. I mean, I grew up in the 1960s. I was around when people used this old school media platform. It's not digital. And the great thing about our signage, like me holding "Free Speech is Under Attack," when the media captures that sign, they can't edit it. They can't change it. Right. So they have a choice to make. Either they ignore it, or when they capture it, it gets through not only to the other side, it gets through to the mushy middle, and it bucks up our side. Our side sees us out there with Second Amendment messages in plain speaking English, and we get a lot of good feedback about that when we're on the street. That's the beauty of the old school signs. I tell folks, if you can finger paint, you're qualified. You're trained up to be on the Patriot Picket.
All right. So I see you have the signs out there. The mainstream media was out in full force. Local TV, national TV. How did it go with the interviews? Jeff, and then I'll ask you, Paul, but Jeff first, how did it go? What did the reporters act like? I'm sure they were not happy with you folks being out there.
No, they wanted to ask leading questions about, don't you think it's agitating, and aren't you confrontational by wearing a firearm, especially with a carbine slung right across the front? Aren't you deliberately being confrontational? And I tell them, no, I'm deliberately being educational. There are a lot of people who don't understand that the Second Amendment does live. There are parts of free America. We're from Maryland. We can't open carry firearms in Maryland. That's the genesis of the Patriot Picket. But when we're in Virginia, we open carry. Paul and I are open carrying today, right here in the studio. He's got a SIG 220. I've got a Smith & Wesson 681 on my hip, and we're seen coming in and out of the building on the street in Alexandria, and there's no SWAT call out, but we do it because carrying firearms at these demonstrations, but being polite and respectful, is part of the education.
All right, so Paul, the media comes and interviews you. Does any of your interviews, either between you and Jeff, Paul, does it make it to the local news?
It actually depends, Grant. Sometimes the locals will do a little more. This particular time, they didn't. I think it's because our message was just plain common sense. So we weren't hysterical. We weren't ranting and raving. So we know that the conflict creates news, and we were kind of out there just giving common sense explanations for why are the women out here in a First Amendment exercise trying to limit the First Amendment rights of the NRA. And of course the reporters shake their heads, and they kind of get it, but it doesn't make a whole lot of local broadcasts. I mean, we were on the local news, and that was good. They did use some sound bites from some other guys and from Jeff and I, but no, out of 10 minutes of interview time, we might have gotten 30 seconds on the air.
Yeah, and that's...
we knocked it out of the park. When the media, the message that the opposition wanted to get out got muddied because, Grant, they went in there with some sort of quasi First Amendment and Second Amendment message, say for LGBT and minorities to get trained up with firearms. But as soon as they saw us, they dropped the 2A freedom message. They just dropped it like a hot rock, and we had that message to ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, last question for you. What was your reaction when you heard that the leaders of the march, which our own Chuck Holton, Frontlines correspondent, was the one who discovered this, actually hired armed security? Now, I'm happy they hired armed security. It means to me they acknowledge the importance of firearm protection. But what were you thinking about the hypocrisy there? Paul, go ahead.
Well, it was on full display. It was on full display. I mean, here they were at a free speech anti-Second Amendment, anti-guns rally with armed security and trying to limit the NRA's free speech.
Never makes sense.
We wish the NRA would come out with a video about that. Honestly, that would be classic.
Well, Grant, they've given you a week full of shows based on this hypocrisy, this insanity. They've given you, this is a gift, a programming gift of the month, isn't it?
Let me tell you something, Jeff. I think we're going to have shows to fill this for not just weeks, but months, maybe even years to come. Listen, gentlemen, I want to tell you, on behalf of all the members of the NRA and NRATV, you two really, and your whole group, represented yourself, I mean, to the T, utmost, first class, 100%. Thank you. Thank you for your support of the NRA, and thank you for coming on NRATV today.
Great to see
Thanks.
you, Grant.
Absolutely, guys. Great to see you as well. And look, you just heard them. The local media didn't cover them. They gave them 30 seconds of coverage. You're going to get that voice on this program on NRATV because you're not hearing it anywhere else. I watched the national news programs. They showed the picket line and shots of those two gentlemen with their AR-15s over their chest, but not sound bites from them. They wanted to make them look like they were crazy. That from the mainstream media. You talk to those gentlemen. Do they sound crazy to you? I asked liberal members of the media, do those two gentlemen sound crazy to you? Common sense folks, common sense support of the Second Amendment. That's what they're giving you. That's what we're giving you. I'm Grant Stinchfield. Chuck Holton will join me at the top of the next hour. Stick around for that as NRATV continues.
You're watching NRATV with Grant Stinchfield.